Disclaimer: this content is intended for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought a simple request from my husband would change the way I looked at him forever. It started on a quiet evening, just the two of us, sitting in our living room, the soft hum of the television in the background. He had been acting a little distant that week, his mind seemingly elsewhere. At first, I brushed it off, thinking work stress or maybe something trivial he didn't want to talk about. But that night, he turned to me with a serious expression, his eyes searching mine as if deciding whether to speak at all. And then, in the calmest voice, he asked me to do something I never expected. For a moment, I thought he was joking. I even laughed, waiting for him to crack a smile. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned forward, reaching for my hand. "I need you to trust me on this," he said. My stomach tightened. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't something small. This was something that would change everything. The weight of his request settled between us like an invisible force. I wanted to ask him why, to understand what was going through his mind, but the words stuck in my throat. My heart pounded as I tried to process what he had just said. Was this the man I had promised to spend my life with? The same man who made me coffee every morning, who held my hand during thunderstorms, who knew exactly how to make me laugh when I was having the worst day. Suddenly, he felt like a stranger. A million thoughts ran through my mind. If I said yes, would I regret it? If I said no, what would that mean for us? I could already feel a shift between us, a distance I didn't know how to close. But deep down, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same after this. Now, I want to ask you, what would you do in my place? Would you blindly trust the person you love, even when their request shakes you to your core? Let me know in the comments. And if you think you already know what he asked me to do, trust me, you don't. Stay tuned, because the truth is more shocking than you can imagine. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears as I sat there, staring at him, waiting for some kind of explanation. But he just held my gaze, his expression unreadable. The man I had trusted with my whole heart, the man I had built a life with, was asking me for something that felt wrong. But was it really wrong? Or was I just overreacting? I needed to understand. "Why?" I finally whispered, my voice barely louder than the ticking clock on the wall. His fingers tightened around mine. "Because it has to be you," he said. That answer didn't help. If anything, it made my stomach churn even more. I wanted him to laugh, to shake his head, and tell me he was messing with me. But he didn't. His face remained serious, his eyes pleading. I pulled my hand away and stood up, pacing the room. My mind was racing, trying to piece together anything that would make sense of this. We had been married for 5 years. I knew him, or at least I thought I did. Sure, he had his secrets. Everyone does. But this was something else, something deeper, something that sent chills down my spine. "I don't understand," I said, turning back to face him. "Why would you even ask me that?" He sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. "I can't explain everything right now," he admitted, "but I need you to trust me." Trust. That word hit me hard. Trust was the foundation of any marriage. But how do you trust someone when they ask you to do something that makes your skin crawl? I sat back down, trying to steady my breathing. "If I say no?" I asked, bracing myself for his answer. He looked at me, something unreadable flashing in his eyes. "Then things will change between us," he said quietly, "and not in a good way." A lump formed in my throat. This wasn't just about his request anymore. This was about us, about who we were to each other, and no matter what I decided, I had a feeling there was no going back. What would you do if you were in my position? Let me know in the comments, and don't go anywhere. The next part of this story will leave you speechless. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic sound of my husband's breathing beside me. He had fallen asleep so easily, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just asked me to do something that made my entire body tense with unease. I turned onto my side, watching his face in the dim glow of the streetlights filtering through our window. He looked peaceful, normal, like the man I had loved for years. But now I wasn't sure if I truly knew him at all. I replayed the conversation over and over in my head, searching for clues, for anything that would make sense. Was there something I had missed? Something leading up to this moment that should have warned me? Maybe I had been too distracted with work, with life, to notice the signs. I thought about the past few weeks, his late nights, his quiet moments, the way he had seemed lost in thought so often. I had assumed he was just stressed, but what if it was something more? The next morning, I watched him carefully, waiting for him to bring it up again. But he didn't. He acted like everything was fine, like nothing had changed between us. He kissed my forehead before heading to work, the same way he always did. "I love you," he said with a small smile, and then he was gone. I sat at the kitchen table, gripping my coffee mug, my mind swirling with questions. Did he expect me to just forget about it? To pretend I wasn't completely unsettled? Maybe that's what scared me the most. Not just what he had asked, but how easily he seemed to move past it, as if it was normal, as if he had no doubt I would go along with it. I needed answers. I needed to understand why. And so, against my better judgment, I decided to look for them myself. I started with his study, his private space, a place I rarely entered because he liked to keep his work separate from our home life. But now I had no choice. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob, my pulse racing. Before I turned it, I hesitated. Was I crossing a line? Was I about to find something I wasn't ready for? What would you do in my position? Would you open the door? Let me know in the comments. And trust me, the truth is more shocking than you think. Stay tuned. My fingers hovered over the doorknob, my breath shallow. A part of me wanted to turn around, to pretend I never even considered stepping into his private space. But another part, an even stronger part, needed to know the truth. Whatever my husband was hiding, whatever had made him ask me for something so unsettling, I had to understand. With a deep breath, I turned the knob slowly, wincing as the door creaked open. The room smelled faintly of him, his cologne, the woodsy scent of his desk. Everything was neat, just as I expected. But as my eyes scanned the space, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I moved cautiously, trailing my fingers over his desk, my heart pounding. My hands trembled as I pulled open the drawers, finding nothing but papers, pens, and things I had seen before. But then I noticed something unusual: his locked filing cabinet. He had never locked it before. My pulse quickened as I knelt in front of it, testing the handle. It didn't budge. I knew this was wrong. I knew I was crossing a boundary. But hadn't he crossed one first? Hadn't he shattered the trust between us the moment he made that request? My mind raced, trying to remember if I had ever seen him open this before. And then I recalled something. Months ago, he had absent-mindedly told me his usual passcode for things, a combination of numbers that meant something to him. I took a chance. My hands were shaking as I typed it in. A click. The cabinet unlocked. I hesitated for a moment before pulling it open. Inside, there were stacks of folders, neatly arranged. My throat went dry as I reached for one. When I flipped it open, I felt the air leave my lungs. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. My hands trembled as I stared at the contents, my stomach twisting into knots. My mind screamed for me to stop, to put everything back, to pretend I never saw it. But I couldn't look away. This wasn't just some small secret. This wasn't something that could be explained away. And now that I knew, I couldn't unsee it. What do you think I found? Drop your guesses in the comments. And trust me, the next part will change everything. Stay tuned. My breath caught in my throat as I flipped through the pages inside the folder, my fingers barely able to hold steady. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was looking at. It was a collection of documents, photos, and handwritten notes. But as I pieced them together, a cold dread washed over me. There were pictures of me, some from years ago, some recent, some I recognized from our vacations, from family gatherings, but others were taken when I wasn't even aware. One was from the grocery store last week, another of me sitting alone in a cafe, my stomach twisted. Why would my husband keep these? And then there were letters, dozens of them, some typed, others scribbled hastily on crumpled sheets of paper. My name was written at the top of each one. The words made my skin crawl. I can't let her find out yet. She won't understand. What if she says no? I have to make her see it's the only way. I swallowed hard, my body frozen in place. My husband had been planning something, and whatever it was, it involved me in ways I didn't fully understand yet. A noise from behind made me jump, the sound of the front door opening. My heart slammed against my ribs. He was home early. Panic surged through me as I shoved the folder back into the cabinet and closed it as quietly as possible. My mind was racing. I had to act normal. I couldn't let him know I had seen this, not until I knew exactly what it all meant. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. "Babe?" His voice was calm, casual, like nothing was wrong. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the office, forcing a smile. "You're home early," I said, hoping my voice didn't betray the fear tightening in my chest. He smiled, setting his keys on the counter. "Yeah, slow day at work. Thought I'd surprise you." I nodded, forcing myself to move past him casually, but inside, my heart was pounding. He had no idea I had seen everything, no idea I knew he was hiding something. But now I had to figure out the truth before it was too late. What do you think my husband is planning? Drop your theories in the comments, and trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Stay tuned. I kept my smile steady as my husband walked toward me, but inside, my mind was spinning. Every part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tell him I knew about the photos, the letters, the secret he had been keeping, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to be careful. He leaned against the kitchen counter, watching me. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning my face like he could sense something was off. I nodded quickly. "Yeah, just tired." He smiled, but something about it felt different now. Forced. Like he was hiding something behind it. And maybe he was. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my mind, trying to piece it together. Why had he been tracking me? What was he waiting for? And then the worst thought hit me. Was I in danger? By morning, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I had to confront him. I waited until he was sitting at the table, sipping his coffee, his phone in hand. "I found your cabinet," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. His hand froze midair. Slowly, he set his coffee down and looked at me. "What cabinet?" "The one in your office," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "The one with the pictures and the letters." For a second, he didn't move. Then something shifted in his expression, something unreadable. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "I was going to tell you," he finally said. I just, I didn't know how." I swallowed hard. "Tell me what?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, sliding it across the table. With shaky hands, I unfolded it. My eyes widened as I read the words. It was a letter, but not from him, from my sister. She had been reaching out to him for months, asking for help, begging him not to tell me until he was sure. And what she needed help with, it changed everything. I looked up at him, my throat dry. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was quiet. Because I knew it would break you. And just like that, everything I thought I knew was turned upside down. What do you think was in the letter? Drop your guesses in the comments. And trust me, you're not ready for what happens next. Stay tuned. I gripped the letter, my hands trembling as I read the words over and over, trying to make sense of them. My sister, the one person I had always trusted, always loved. She had been hiding something from me, something so big that she had gone to my husband instead of coming to me. Tears blurred my vision as I looked up at him. Why? My voice cracked. Why didn't she just tell me? He sighed, his expression filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, sadness, maybe even relief. She was afraid, love. She didn't want to burden you. She thought you'd try to fix everything for her, and she wasn't ready for that. I swallowed hard. That sounded like my sister, always trying to carry the weight of the world on her own shoulders. But why go to my husband? And what was he helping her with that he felt he couldn't tell me? I forced myself to read further, my pulse hammering in my ears. The truth hit me like a wave. She was in trouble, deep trouble, and she had been trying to get out of it without me knowing. My husband had been helping her behind my back, trying to protect both of us in his own way. The fear I had been feeling, the distrust, the paranoia, it had all been for nothing. He wasn't planning something against me. He wasn't hiding some dark, sinister secret. He was just trying to shield me from pain. I exhaled shakily, setting the letter down. You should have told me. I know, he said softly. I just didn't know how. A heavy silence filled the room, but something between us shifted. The weight of suspicion lifted, replaced by something deeper. Understanding. I reached for his hand, squeezing it. No more secrets, I whispered. No more secrets, he agreed. It wasn't the ending I expected, but maybe, just maybe, it was the one we needed. Would you have forgiven him? Let me know in the comments, and if you want a sequel, tell me what you'd like to see next.